All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here on this snowy night in Pittsburgh. Perhaps it's snowy wherever you're joining us from. Um, Gotta love a nice snowy wintry day. So, like Amber said, this is a presentation on winter birding in Pittsburgh's parks, and my goal is to just get you ready to go birding in your neighborhood or in a park near you through the winter time. So here's my agenda for this evening. First, we're going to go over some tools and tips for winter birding. Then we'll kind of go over how do you identify birds, what kinds of things do you want to be looking for and observing about birds to help you identify them. Then we'll review just some of the more common birds you're likely to see through the winter months in our region. And then we'll get into some practice identifying birds. And then after that, I'll just share a little bit about some citizen science stuff you could get involved with and contribute to research that's happening right here in Pittsburgh. So that's sort of the plan. And like Amber said, feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions as we go along, and we should have some time at the end for some questions as well. Cool. So first up here is just what do you take with you when you go out birding in the winter? Probably the most important thing is enough layers to be comfortable out there, especially like a windbreaker layer or anything that'll help protect you from the wind. In the wintertime, when there's no leaves on the trees, we can get some pretty strong winds blowing, and that can chill you down really fast. So something to protect you from the wind, wear layers. You can see a lot of folks in this picture are wearing hats and gloves. So yeah, layers are important. Gloves are tricky. You want gloves that aren't so thick that it's hard to work your binoculars with. So if you have fingerless gloves, that can be really good, or some thinner gloves, and some nice cozy pockets to keep your hands in whenever they're not on your binoculars. If it's really icy, some winter traction equipment can come in handy, whether that's trekking poles or different crampons or other sorts of spikes that you strap onto your shoes. That can help keep you from slipping and falling when it's icy. Obviously, binoculars are an important piece of equipment to take with you birding, and your cell phone can be a really important tool to take with you as well. Whether you're using bird ID apps or field guides that you have downloaded to your phone, or using something like eBird to track what birds you're seeing and help you keep a list for your own records or to contribute to research. All right, so now we're going to get into how do we identify the birds that we're seeing around us. There's really three main questions you want to answer, and you're going to have to make really detailed observations to be able to answer them as accurately as you can. So the questions are, how big are they? What color or colors are they? And what are they doing? Beyond that, it can also be helpful to just notice other things about the birds, like their shape or their behaviors, and to look for what are called field marks. These are distinguishing features in their feathers and their plumage that can help separate them from other similar species of birds. So like I said, the main three questions you're trying to answer when you look at a bird is how big are they, what colors are they, and what are they doing? So for how big are they, you're using common birds as your reference points. So you're trying to compare the bird you're looking at to these four common birds. So is it the size of a goose? Is it bigger or smaller? And then kind of comparing. A lot of times what you're looking at maybe is close to one of these, but a little smaller or a little bigger. and that can really help you narrow down what species you're looking at. The next piece of information you want to collect, next question you want to answer is, what colors are they? So birds come in a variety of colors. These are kind of the most common colors you'll see on birds in our area. And sometimes birds will have multiple colors, so noting if they have certain colors on certain parts of their body can be helpful too. And then the last one is just, what are they doing? So the behavior of each bird species is pretty unique. And some birds are more common in specific places or habitats or doing specific things. Like, for example, you probably won't find a red-tailed hawk swimming or wading in a pond, but you might find a mallard or a goose or a great blue heron doing one of those things. Yeah. So those are the three main questions you'll want to answer to help you narrow down what bird you're looking at. As you start to practice identifying birds, you'll start to notice a lot of patterns in the way birds are shaped as well. Different families of birds tend to have a common shape, and you'll see this when we get into the next few slides I have. You'll see that the related birds all are about the same shape. Then the last thing to observe are their field marks. So this is definitely more towards the advanced end of birding, but for certain groups of birds, field marks are essential to tell different species apart. For example, the sparrows, they're all relatively small brown birds, and you can only really start to tell them apart once you look at the details, especially on their head, looking at their throat patch or their crown stripe and their eyebrow stripe. So really trying to notice those patterns and look for these field marks. So these are some graphics that just show you the common places to look for different field marks. All right, so what birds are here in the wintertime? The next few slides I've broken down into groups of birds that have something in common. And I've tried to put the most common birds within each category on the slide. There are some birds that I am not covering just because, you know, there's a lot of different birds that can be found here, but I've covered all of the common birds in this presentation. So the first category I wanted to start with is birds of prey. So this includes things like hawks, eagles, owls, and falcons. And in each of these slides, the names of the birds, like the pictures and the names go in clockwise order, starting from the upper left. So up here, we've got the red-tailed hawk, and we've got the merlin, the Cooper's hawk, the eastern screech owl, and the bald eagle. So what these birds have in common is that they're all a little bit on the larger end of that spectrum. The screech owl is an exception to that. They're one of the smallest owls, and they're the smallest bird of prey that is in our area, at least year-round. And so, yeah, a lot of these birds you can find soaring or flying really fast, and they tend to be on the larger side. All of these can be found year-round in Pittsburgh, except for the merlin. The merlin is much more common in the wintertime. This tends to be where they come for the winter, and they'll spend the warmer months further north in Canada, where they breed. They're an interesting bird too because they're found throughout the entire northern hemisphere. So they're found in North America, Europe, and Asia, which is pretty cool. So yeah, these are the birds of prey that are common around here. One owl that I didn't put on here that's also pretty common is the great horned owl. But owls don't get spotted quite as often as these other birds of prey. They're a little more secretive. And we also have a couple other species of hawks, but these are the most common ones, the red-tailed hawk and the Cooper's hawk. The red-tailed hawk can be distinguished by its red tail in mature hawks. In juvenile hawks, it doesn't have red tail feathers. They've got kind of banded tail feathers, very similar to what the Cooper's hawk has down here, but they'll always have this darker patch across their breast. So that's one way to tell the difference. If you think you're looking at an immature red-tailed hawk, it'll have this darker patch on its breast, which the Cooper's hawk won't have. And the Cooper's hawk is a little smaller too. So those are our birds of prey. The next group here are the woodpeckers. Pretty cool birds. What they have in common is they're often perched along the trunks of trees or in the branches of trees, and they are partially to mostly black. And all of them except the downy woodpecker here have a fairly large beak. So these are all males, and males and females in birds often look relatively similar, at least in their shape, but in their color patterns, they can be quite different. So in woodpeckers, the females sometimes have less vibrant colors. So for instance, the downy woodpecker and the hairy woodpecker, the female won't have this red patch on the back of their head. So yeah, these are our woodpeckers. They're pretty common in forested areas, and there's two species I didn't include on here that are a little rarer, the yellow-bellied sapsucker and the red-headed woodpecker. So they're pretty rare here in our city parks, but they are found every now and then, especially during migration. They seem to be a little more common then. But now in the wintertime, these are the main woodpeckers we're looking for. And for the most part, they're pretty distinct. The pileated is the largest. The next largest would be the northern flicker, then the red-bellied woodpecker, then the hairy, and then the downy. The hairy and the downy look very similar. The easiest way to tell them apart, if you aren't sure about their size, like I said, the hairy is larger than the downy. The easiest way to tell them apart is to look at their beak. On the hairy woodpecker, their beak is almost as long as their head. On the downy woodpecker, their beak is much shorter. So if you can get a good look at their beak, that's a great way to tell those two apart. One last thing I wanted to share is that the pileated woodpecker here is only found in areas where there's a large contiguous patch of forest. So if you go to Frick or Shenley or some of the other larger parks where there's a lot of forested area that's not broken up by roads, that's where you're most likely to find the pileated woodpecker. The other ones can be found even in urban areas. Sometimes you'll find them pecking on your gutters, drumming on them, or on telephone poles. They can be pretty common. All right. The next group I wanted to share are the finches. So you can see with these pictures here that they have a very similar shape. All three species here have a very similar shape to their body and to their beaks. So they have this tiny conical beak And another characteristic they all share that isn't super clear in these pictures is they all have what's called a notched tail. You can see it best over here in the American goldfinch. You can see it's got this V cut out of its tail. So the American goldfinch and the house finch are pretty common feeder birds. If you have a bird feeder at your house, they're pretty common to see at your feeder. I've got one at my house, and I've been seeing a lot of these birds over the past few weeks. The pine siskin is a little bit rarer, and it is a winter visitor. So you only see them in our area during the winter months. Pretty cool bird.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I haven't definitely, will have to look out for that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen them in Pittsburgh before, but I have seen them like up towards Clarion, Oil City, up in that area, in some of the state parks up there.
Cool. Yeah, definitely seeing like a ton of the goldfinches and the house finches, and they just like never left from the summer.
Yeah. Yep, they stick around through the winter. And these are all males of these species. So the females are a lot more drab, a lot more brown or gray, and lacking the brighter coloration. Also, something I just learned as I was preparing for this presentation is that the house finch is an introduced species from the West Coast. They're native to North America west of the Rockies, and they were introduced to the East Coast. I forget exactly when, but yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
All right, the next group here are the sparrows. So these birds, what they have in common is that they are small and they are predominantly brown or gray, and they're common in brushy areas or at the edges of forests and at bird feeders. So we've got the house sparrow, the dark-eyed junco, the white-throated sparrow, and the song sparrow. Those are the most common ones here through the wintertime, but there are other sparrows in the area that are a little more rare. And depending on where you go, the diversity of sparrow species can increase dramatically. Here in the more urban areas, not as much sparrow diversity, but if you get out to more rural areas or areas where there's grasslands, you can find a lot more sparrow species in those areas. Sparrows are a great bird to learn field marks on because they're a little bit more challenging to identify to species than some of the other groups. You really have to pay attention to things like their eye line. Like if you look at the song sparrow here, they have this brown line coming out from behind their eye. Same here on the white-throated sparrow, they have this black line. And then the house sparrow has this kind of tannish line. They also have distinct throat patches, like the white-throated sparrow here, as well as crown and eyebrow stripes. So sparrows are great birds to learn some of those field marks on.
Stephen, I have one question, and I'm sorry I won't talk as much as I have so far, but I just spotted the dark-eyed junco for the first time today. So are all sparrows invasive? Like, are they all invasive or just a couple?
Yeah, they are not all invasive. So 3 of these birds are native to Pennsylvania. 1 is an introduced species. So the house sparrow was introduced from Europe back in, I don't know, the 1800s. Was that one of the birds that was brought over for the William Shakespeare plays in Central Park along with the starlings?
Yes, I think I read that too. Yeah.
If not then they came over on ships. But yeah, they're an introduced species. The other 3 are native, but the dark-eyed junco and the white-throated sparrow you only find in Pittsburgh during the winter months. So you can find them in more mountainous areas during the summer, especially the dark-eyed junco. If you go up into the Laurel Highlands area, you can find juncos in the summertime. They'll breed there. But down here in the river valleys of Pittsburgh, you won't find juncos until you get into the colder months. So that makes sense that you didn't see them until more recently. Great question. Alrighty. The next group here are the thrushes. So we've got the eastern bluebird, the hermit thrush, and the American robin. What these birds have in common is they all have very rounded heads compared to other birds. They have a pretty distinct, like, round head shape, and they've got pretty plump bodies. And they're just cool with that. They're doing their thing. That's who they are, and they're proud of it. So yeah, they're a little bit on the rounder side, and I think it makes them particularly cute. Robins are some of my favorite birds. So yeah, the hermit thrush is pretty rare here through the wintertime, but it is possible to see them. They're more common during migration, during spring and fall, and you can find them through the summer as well. Yeah. The thrushes all have great examples of eye rings. The robins is the most distinct. You can see this white patch around their eye. So that's one field mark you can learn and look for in birds that can help you identify them. So thrushes, the hermit thrush and the robin mostly hang out down low on the ground, but they will perch up in trees sometimes as well. The next group here are the corvids. So that includes the common raven, the blue jay, the American crow, and the fish crow. And this is a family group. So the blue jay looks a lot different than the crows and ravens, but they're all closely related. They're all in the same family. And the raven is the largest. It has a really stout beak and a wedge-shaped tail. And they're the least common of these birds in Pittsburgh. Occasionally they're spotted flying over, but they're a little more common in more mountainous areas like the Laurel Highlands or the Appalachian Mountains, if you head out of the city a bit. But they can be found here in Pittsburgh. I've heard ravens fly over in Frick Park before. So blue jays, they're pretty common. They're one of the birds, probably one of the first birds most people learn, because they're this bright blue bird with all these distinct patterns on them. They've got that little mohawk of feathers on the back of their head. The American crow and the fish crow look almost identical. In fact, I don't think I could tell them apart by looking at them. I mostly rely on their vocalizations to distinguish them. So if you start to listen to bird calls, especially if you go online and look up their songs and play them, you can start to learn the differences between them. And that's the easiest way, I feel like, to distinguish a fish crow from an American crow. But the American crow technically is a little bit larger and a little bit taller than the fish crow. So you can tell a little bit by size. All right, so all of the groups so far have been more of like family groups or groups of related birds. Now I'm going to get into birds that share their habitat rather than relationships with each other. So this group is birds that you'll find in more forested areas, our forest songbirds. So we've got the white-breasted nuthatch up here. We've got the Carolina chickadee, the golden crowned kinglet. This is the Carolina wren, the tufted titmouse, and the brown creeper. So out of these 6 birds, the golden crowned kinglet is a winter visitor. You really only see this during migration and during the winter months. The other ones can be found year-round. The brown creeper is probably the rarest of all of these, but the other 4 are pretty common in our urban parks here. I see them a lot in Frick Park, in Highland Park, and pretty much anywhere I go birding, I'll notice those birds if I'm out for long enough.
Stephen, is this nuthatch like the, because I sometimes I wonder if I see like a brown nuthatch as well. Is that just like the female, or like is there another kind of nuthatch also?
That's a great question. Yeah, there is another species of nuthatch in our area, which is the red-breasted nuthatch, and they prefer coniferous forests. You'll find them much more commonly in hemlock forests or in pine forests. So we don't have a ton of them here in our city parks, just because there aren't a lot of areas of pine forest or hemlock forest here. But yeah, they are occasionally found, especially during spring and fall migration. That's when I've seen and heard red-breasted nuthatches in our city parks. And then with chickadees, there's 2 species of chickadee in Pennsylvania, the black-capped chickadee and the Carolina chickadee. And Pittsburgh is right about where the ranges of both of those species overlaps. And those species are able to breed with each other and create hybrids. And beyond that, they also learn their calls from each other, so you can't rely on their vocalizations to distinguish between the 2 species.
Oh, that's cool. That's crazy.
Yeah, there are Carolina chickadees that will sing a black-capped chickadee song, and there are black-capped chickadees that will sing a Carolina chickadee song. But here in the city, we're more within the Carolina chickadees range, so that's why I put the Carolina chickadee up here. But if you go further north, then you get further into places where you're more likely to see black-capped chickadees. And I'm trying to think of related birds that aren't up here. There's also a ruby-crowned kinglet that's related to the golden-crowned kinglet, but they're not really common here in the wintertime. We see them more through the summer and especially during migration. They can be really common in spring and fall, grouped together with other migrating birds. Cool. Next group here are our urban birds. So we've got the European starling, the beloved rock pigeon, the mourning dove, the northern mockingbird, and the northern cardinal. So these are all birds that are pretty common in urban settings, and they tend to thrive in urban settings. You'll find them at your bird feeder or in urban parks. Yeah, and while some of these birds are introduced from other places in the world, most of them are native. They were here before Europeans colonized North America, and they just happen to thrive in urban settings. In fact, I think the European starling is the only species here that was introduced. So yeah, those birds all thrive in our urban environment. The cardinal's probably another one of those birds that you first learn. So if you're just learning birds, if you signed up for this because you're like, oh yeah, birding sounds cool, I want to learn how to do that. That's another great one to learn. This is the male. The female looks identical in shape, but again is a lot more drab in color. can be a lot more of a gray color, but still has a bright orange beak. All right, this is the last group of birds I wanted to share, and these are some of our water birds. So again, this is a diverse group. Most of these birds aren't related to each other closely, and the only thing they really have in common is that they tend to be found near water. So we've got the belted kingfisher up here, the Canada goose, great blue heron, mallard, and ring-billed gull. So
I'm
some of
gonna
these birds.
pause you for a second.
Yeah.
We have a question from back on the other slide about how to tell apart a female cardinal and a cedar waxwing.
Ah, a female cardinal and a cedar waxwing. Oh, that's a good question. So a cedar waxwing has a couple distinct field marks on it that will help you distinguish it from a female cardinal. It has yellow and red tips to some of its feathers. So if you look up, I should, let me pull up a picture of a cedar waxwing here. Can you all see that? Cool. So this is a cedar waxwing. This is a bird I didn't include in my presentation, but that you'll find around here. They're not as common in the winter months. They're more common spring through fall, but you can see they've got this distinct yellow band on their tail and these red bands on their wings, and their beak and face has this black mask. The female cardinal, while it does have a bit of black on their face, they have that bright orange beak, and they'll be this general color here, like this brownish gray color. They'll kind of have that all over their body. They won't have this like lighter breast with the yellow, and they won't have the bright yellow or bright red at the ends of these feathers on their wings and tail. But yeah, that's a great question. Let's see if I can do this. Woo! Back to the PowerPoint. So yeah, these are the water birds. Belted kingfishers you can find around creeks and rivers, as well as ponds and lakes. So they can be found anywhere near water, but you won't find them too far from water. They catch fish, and so they've got to be close to a stream or a pond or something. Geese and ducks, sometimes you can find away from water a little bit, but mostly they're near still bodies of water, occasionally slower moving rivers and things like that. Herons you can find mostly at ponds and lakes and things like that, wetland areas, but sometimes you'll find them in larger creeks and rivers. And gulls you can find very far from water sometimes. This is one of the two more common species of gull that you can find in Pittsburgh. We've got the ring-billed gull and the herring gull, and they're very similar in appearance. Gulls are pretty cool because it takes them 4 or 5 years to develop their mature plumage. So they've got immature feathers for a long time compared to other species of birds that develop their mature feathers pretty rapidly. Like all of the songbirds develop their mature plumage within a year. I just thought it was kind of cool that gulls take 4 or 5 years to get there. And yeah, this is the male mallard. A lot of folks are probably familiar with the mallard. They're the most common duck. There's a lot of ducks that you can find throughout the Pittsburgh area in the winter months, but this is the most common. Just the other day at Lake Carnegie in Highland Park, I spotted some American black ducks, which look very similar to the female mallard. They're just darker. They're like a more chocolatey brown color. And then this is I think this is the female coloration of the belted kingfisher. The male lacks this rusty patch underneath here.
Stephen, if it takes much longer for the gulls to develop their plumage, how long do the gulls live? It's a question that we have from Beth.
Geez, I don't know. That's a great question. Perhaps we will look that up later.
I can look that up, I think, and put it in the chat.
Cool. Thanks, Amber. All right. So now we've reviewed all of the common birds that you'll see here in the Pittsburgh area through the winter time. And next, I wanted to give you all some practice identifying birds, especially if you join this because you have zero experience birding and you just think it's cool and you want to get into it. I wanted to make sure we gave folks a chance to really practice and learn at this presentation. So if you wanted to, there's a really great free app you could get for your phone or tablet called Merlin. It's made by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's a free app, and they have an awesome bird ID tool that you could use and practice using during these next couple slides. While I'm here, I should also highlight that the Audubon has a field guide app that you can download for free as well. And there are some paid bird ID apps that you can download. The most popular one is called iBird. I think it costs around $15 for the full pro version of iBird. So if you're just getting into this, Merlin and the Audubon apps are great free apps that can really help you learn a lot more about birds and really advance your birding skills pretty quickly. So if you wanted to take a moment to download that app, if you don't have it yet, feel free to do so. In the next few slides, I was thinking it could be cool if we did it where I put up the image of a bird and folks could start by practicing making some observations and answering those questions that I mentioned at the beginning. So size is going to be a little tricky because you're looking at a picture and it can be hard to know what the scale is within that picture. So maybe don't pay so much attention to size, but what colors do you see and what are they doing? Are some observations you could share in the chat. So that way everyone can get some practice making some observations. And then if folks wanted to take a guess at what bird we're looking at, you could put that in the chat as well. So we'll see how this goes. I've got 4 pictures and we'll just cycle through them one at a time. So here's the first one. So feel free to put in the chat some observations about their size, what colors you see, and what they're doing. Are they flying? Are they perched somewhere? Oh, wow. And Amber just shared an answer to that question. Gulls can live as long as 20 years, but on average, more around 10. That's pretty long for a bird that often eats garbage. All right, so we've got a great observation here from Beth. This bird is perched in a tree. And Robin shared it's got a cool crest and a distinct black collar. So yeah, that's what that's called, a crest. And it's got a collar around the neck here that's black. And I believe someone shared blue jay, loud bird. Awesome. Elizabeth shared, yeah, it's perched blue, black, white, and gray. So yeah, if you were using the Merlin bird ID tool, it'll ask you to input your location. So you could just put wherever you're at right now, Pittsburgh. And then it'll ask you for the date. You could plug in today, and then it'll have you answer those same 3 questions. Size, color, and what are they doing? And then it'll give you a suggestion of the most likely birds that the app thinks it is. So if anyone did that, I'd be curious to know what your top suggestion was. Might be a little tricky because of the size. But yeah, we got 1 guess for blue jay. These are very loud birds, and they have a lot of distinct calls. Probably one of the most varied in their vocalizations, at least among the birds that we commonly hear around here. They've got a sound, like their most common one sounds like they're saying Jay, Jay, but they also can sound like a rusty swing set sometimes, and sometimes they can even imitate the sound of hawks to scare other birds away from somewhere they want to be, like your bird feeder. All right. Next bird here. So let's start off with some observations. If you know what species this is, maybe hold off on putting that in the chat for those who are learning. And share some observations about the size, color, and behavior of this bird. So yeah, this is another one that has that crest. We've got the crest coming off the head here. Yeah, it does have a cone-shaped beak. Great observation. It's got a pretty stout beak. The beak is bright orange. Awesome observations. Yeah, it's a medium-sized bird, somewhere around robin-sized maybe. And it's perched on a branch. Anyone have a guess as to what species of bird this is? Feel free to unmute and share too if you're more comfortable that way. Yeah, this is the northern cardinal. This is the female cardinal. So folks were asking before, how do you tell the difference? This one's pretty bright. They aren't always this bright. Sometimes they're a lot more gray. Cool. Next bird. So what do you notice about this bird? About its size, its color, its behavior, any field marks? And I picked this one out because sometimes you don't get the perfect look at a bird. You know, sometimes you see them from underneath and all you really see is their belly and you can hardly see the other parts of them. So I wanted to give folks a little bit more practice of what it would be like if we were out on a hike together. It's round. Ooh, it's got a notch in the tail. That's a great observation. So if you look in the back here, it's a little blurry, but it's got that little V cut out of its tail. So that should tell us it's in a certain group of birds, if we remember from earlier. It's pretty round, yeah. I'm guessing this bird is pretty cold. They don't normally look this puffed up. A lot of times birds will really fluff up their feathers when they're perched in the wintertime to really help them stay warm, create a lot of air pockets in their down. All right, so someone shared, there's a white bar on the wing and a yellow patch on the chin. Awesome. Anyone want to share what species of bird you think this is? It is a finch, and it is an American goldfinch. Great job. You all are awesome at this. All right, here's the last one I have a picture of. So if you want to share some observations of this one. Yeah, it's a smaller bird. It's hard to tell exactly how large this branch is that it's perched on, but definitely smaller. It's got a striped head. Yeah. Anyone want to share some observations on the colors of this bird? Interesting yellow eyebrows. Yeah. Very bright yellow right there in front of the eyes. And it's got a white throat. And that is a really great field mark to look for to identify this species. Anyone want to share a guess as to what species this might be? Brown and gray are the dominant colors here. But then it's got black and white on its head. So yeah, because it's mostly brown and gray and it's a small bird, it's a sparrow. Great job. Anyone know exactly what type of sparrow this is? All right, yeah, it's a white-throated sparrow. Awesome. You guys are great. Cool. So I had one more test of your birding abilities if you're enjoying this. So there's a lot of great live feeder cams out there. So if you get on YouTube and you look up like live bird feeder cam, one of the top ones you'll find is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and this is at their campus in Ithaca. It's called Sapsucker Woods. So this is like a 5-minute clip of a bunch of different birds visiting these bird feeders. And if folks wanted to just practice, I thought this would be a little bit closer to what it would be like on a bird hike where birds fly in and fly out, and you don't always get like a steady look at them. So it could be some good practice for you if you're new to this. So I thought we could play this video and just have a little fun sharing what birds we're noticing. Plus then we get to hear all the birds chirping and doing that too. So here we go. So yeah, feel free to comment at any point. A cool observation about a bird you're seeing, or just share a species of bird that you're noticing. And feel free to unmute and ask questions, put questions in the chat. My favorite thing about this video is all of the cute bird feeders.
I love the angry owl.
So there was a question, is that a junco in the background? I missed the junco, but Amber said yes it is, and I trust her.
It was on the back in the on the fence.
Nice. So yeah, right now we've got 3 different species. Oh, now we're down to just 2 different species. Oh, now we're back up to 3. Oh, this is a great example here of the male and female of the northern cardinal. So you can see they've got that same shape, with different colors. Someone shared, there's a downy woodpecker. Yeah, so this woodpecker here in the middle, it's getting this suet feeder. It's got a pretty short beak compared to its head, and it's on the smaller side. You can see it's almost the same size as this goldfinch down here. So it's a pretty small woodpecker. It's a downy. Oh, the other cool thing about this video is this was yesterday in Ithaca. So it's as close as I could get to us like birding right now. Yeah, so this is the Cornell Lab feeder watch cam at Sapsucker Woods. And so you can get on YouTube, even if you just Google like Cornell Lab feeder cam, you'll find a link to this, and you can just have this on in the background while you're hanging out at home. Pop over and see what birds are at the feeder. They do prefer the wooden ledge, it seems. Yeah, a lot of birds are down here. And yeah, these goldfinches, those are the male goldfinches. They are a little more brown than some of the pictures I shared. The female has no yellow at all. Hopefully we can get a female to fly in here. We've got a tufted titmouse here. We got a peanut and ran.
I love watching how fast they come in and out.
It's a black-capped chickadee.
What do you? I already had something when it got to the feeder.
Ooh,
Ooh,
who is that?
is that a sparrow?
Yeah,
Is that such a rusty little cap?
that is a
It's so
sparrow.
cute. It's about like, it's almost like the same size as maybe a little bit bigger than the goldfinches. Tufted titmouse, I see you. That house finch was like, scatter.
I think the sparrow could have been an American tree sparrow.
Hmm.
Not one we often see around here, but that was one of the top results in my quick Merlin bird ID search. Cool.
It's because blue jays are kind of jerky.
So last few things I wanted to share. Thanks so much all for sticking with us to the end here. Last few things I wanted to share were just about how you can turn your bird observations into data for scientists to use to help with conservation efforts right here in Pittsburgh. So eBird is an app you can get for your phone, or just a website you can make an account on and enter your lists in. This is an example of a checklist I filled out yesterday in Highland Park. I went down to the lake, saw a bunch of ducks and some geese and some other birds. You can see the path I walked from the lake back up into my neighborhood. And yeah, if you get eBird on your phone, you can keep track of birds as you're walking, and then that data gets shared in a huge database. Here's a map of observations from around the world. The United States is the area of greatest density of bird data on eBird. A lot of people are on there sharing their findings, and scientists can get on and access that database and use it to better understand different aspects of birds' migration, their population levels. And so there's all kinds of cool publications that have come out of using eBird data. And right now in Pittsburgh's parks, over in Frick Park, you can contribute to some research we're doing on Clayton Hill right near the Environmental Center. So this is Homewood Cemetery up here. This is the Environmental Center. This is Beechwood Boulevard. This is Forbes Avenue. And then Braddock Avenue is somewhere over this way. Right now, we're monitoring bird populations on 4 different areas of Clayton Hill. So you can use eBird and head to Frick Park and bird there and submit a list of the birds that you saw, and that data will be used to help us understand how the work that we're doing on Clayton Hill is impacting the bird populations. So there's a lot of invasive plants in this area that humans and goats have been working very hard to remove, and eventually they will be replaced with some native species, and this area will be continually stewarded to improve the quality of the forest habitat there. So if you're interested in volunteering a little bit and getting out and just birding, contributing your findings, we could definitely use your help.
Stephen, is there a better time, like best times to go birding, or does it depend on the bird? What are good birding times?
Early morning tends to be really good. In the winter time though, I feel like it can be good mid-morning and then a little bit later into the day, especially if it's a sunny day and things can warm up a little bit. I feel like I have better birding on cloudy days than sunny days though. And evening can also be pretty good for birding. I don't think there's a bad time to go birding though. Definitely you won't see as much in the middle of the day, especially in the summer if it's really hot, but there's no such thing as a bad time to go birding, I would say. There's always interesting stuff out there to find. And then obviously, you know, if the birds you're looking for are night active birds, things like owls, you want to go out at night. See if you can hear them and track them down.
Yes, the recording, so Kristen asked if the recording will be sent out, and I will be sending the recording to our marketing team, and they'll be sending it out to everybody who registered. And I believe I'm probably putting it up somewhere else, Stephen?
I think it'll probably get posted to our YouTube channel. So.
Well, thank you. This was so much fun. You guys did a really great job.
Yay, thanks so much for being here. Yeah, anyone else have any questions before we head off for the evening? Thank you again for being here, for sharing your observations and your questions, and just being a great audience. And I look forward to when we can bird together again someday. Yes, get out there, enjoy the snow.